Hey everybody, welcome to What's Going On in Utica. This is going out as a regular podcast for my Patreon members, and also it will later be posted as a bonus episode on my regular podcast to maybe get some of you guys interested in my Patreon. I am trying to build that up. It's a great way to support the podcast. For $3 a month, you can get the card of the day and one tarot class. For $5 a month, you can get just these Paranormal Karen episodes, which you get two a month, which are between 30 and 45 minutes. The first one is In Bed with Paranormal Karen, where I just talk about all the things I'm reading and the new stuff I learn. And then there is this one, which is called What's Going On in Utica. It is about all the strange things about upstate New York. And when I started that, I was like, oh, well, this is going to have a limit. You're not going to find enough paranormal things to fill all these podcasts. Oh, no, I'm just beginning. There is so much about upstate New York. So as long as I'm here, that is going to be the second podcast. I'll change that when the time comes. But now there's no reason to look. So on my Patreon podcast, I had a lovely guest who will remain nameless because she lives here in upstate New York, and no reason to lose your job over a podcast, right? But within the conversation, she was talking about how many cults started or are in upstate New York. And when I looked into it, holy cow, we are cult popular. Some of you may know Mormonism started in upstate New York. Scientology, I believe, started here or was anchored here. So you're welcome. There is the Word of Life Church, which I'm not going to talk about too much in this one. It's in or was in New Hartford. I didn't look into the details, which I literally walk to New Hartford every day when I go to the grocery store or yoga, whatever. But today I want to focus on a cult that is no longer around or underground called NXIVM. NXIVM. I have been taking in information on this and it is fascinating. I'm going to start with why I am usually a terrible listener, but this will give you some insight into how to listen to this podcast because I find it very interesting. I don't listen and just take in. When I watch or listen to something, I go, where would I be in this situation? So like when I watch The Last of Us on HBO, I am like, I would rock the zombie world. I know exactly what I would do. I've said this many times. Zombie things never excite me because I think zombies would smell. So The Walking Dead, I don't feel I would ever be surprised by them. But they do a good job of this in The Last of Us. Let's just say if Armageddon hits and there's a zombie thing, I'm your leader. I will be your cult leader at that point. Romantic movies, I can't watch them because I don't see my place in them, other than the older person giving advice, which would probably be bad or wrong. So as I'm listening to all this cult stuff, I was taking in podcasts, there's movies, there's articles, there is so much on this cult. And what I was figuring, it's so funny because I had about 3 memories come up. They weren't coming up because of trauma. They weren't coming up just because I didn't think about them. And there were 2 or 3 occasions where people tried to once initiate me into a coven. So I'm going to talk about that when it comes up. And also a yoga retreat where the people were honestly wanting to start a cult, but we're just too lazy. And I'm going to talk about that one. But when you listen to this, the first thing it's easy to sit and go, oh, I would never end up in this. And I'm the champion of telling everyone, oh, I'm an anarchist and that's what comedians do and blah, blah, blah. But when you really listen to the manipulation, you will find your own trigger points where, yeah, I could have seen being pulled in by that, or in your early 20s or something like that. So it's a very interesting way to listen. And I'm going to keep presenting that to you. All these manipulations are really, you will see bits and pieces of them everywhere. Years ago, there was a book called The Pickup Artist. and it was for men. It was written by this guy that was, I guess, unattractive or sort of gross, and men just looked up to him because he slept with so many women. And the book was really, I think at one point I took in like a couple paragraphs, or I got it at the library, and it was really women hating and gross. And one of his ways of manipulating was to go with a group of women. The one he wanted to make sure he gave her no attention, and then a little attention, like she would be so thrilled to get his attention after he sort of had the group's attention. And then he would cut her down. He would just find a way to make her self-conscious. This is really one of the ways that just you see this throughout everything when you listen to these people that went into cults. So they find your weakness and they accent it. And one of the weaknesses, which is something I feel like we all have, is feeling a part of a group. It's coming up a lot now. It'd be interesting to see if 5 years from now, certain cults start to come into view with, first of all, the pandemic, where they separated us all. Oops, sorry about that alarm. Where they separated us all. And then people right now are really craving becoming part of a group, but no one knows how to do it anymore. And people are really at a loss for almost how to be people around other people. So that sort of combined with people honestly wanting to go on their own, live off the land, sort of bring up communes, these two things are crashing right now. So it'll be interesting to see what cults pop up perhaps a year from now. No, 5 years from now. So this story about this cult just involves everything. In fact, one of the saddest things was one of the podcasts I was listening to. The girl kind of became pulled in. One of the first people she met, I don't know if she said it was the producer or the director. It was somebody having to do with the film What the Bleep Do We Know, which is one of my favorites. It's a film that you can't watch all together. It's a lot to take in, and it was one of the first on the manifesting and thinking positive, and it just still, you watch it in bits and pieces, it makes sense. It's a lot of the information that we have now, but at that time it was sort of just coming out, and one of the guys in it was very much into this cult, which kind of disappointed me. But I can see I was very taken by this film, so I might be very taken by this person. So this story has everything. It has celebrities, it has the guy ended up in jail, thank God, and because as it goes on, it just gets worse and worse. So I think this is actually going to be a two-parter. But the cult was also built on a multi-level marketing scheme. Like, you got paid by the more people you brought in. It was really crazy. And I want to say that, just to throw this out there, I know doTERRA is a multi-level marketing thing, but it's a really good product. And I think that one works. So if you're a part of doTERRA, hands up. I get most of my oils from Rocky Mountain Oil, but I got nothing bad to say about doTERRA oils, and I have a friend that sends them to me. So I guess some multi-level marketing things work. Also, I was a cigarette girl in Las Vegas at Caesar's Palace back when there was nothing. There wasn't even a Mirage. It was the top of the top, making all kinds of money, running around in the 80s in a little skirt, getting tipped all the time. And the lady that owned it, who is still a friend of mine, was very heavy into Scientology, and so were some of the girls that were in it. And I'm going to get to that later, but it is interesting how she manipulated, I hate to say that because I like her so much, but some of these girls ended up in Scientology and couldn't get out. So what Leah Remy is talking about is very true. There was also a weird instinct in me that I knew how to play her, and I was never approached. And I'll talk about that later. So let's get into this cult and how it got started and what was going on. Okay, so people that know my podcast know, or the Patreon people, they know that I tend to stop and start what I'm doing or how I'm taping, but it just sounds like a continuous thing. So if you hear me say I'm back and you're like, you never left, that is because I took a break. So I have taken in so much about this NXIVM cult. I don't know if this is going to be the only one or if there's going to be a June follow-up. I don't think I can get it all in one because this is crazy. And what I didn't know is a lot of cult experts say this cult that was up here in Albany and Clifton, New York, was one of the worst. I have been watching, I've watched so many documentaries on this guy, and I've listened to podcasts. By the way, two very different things that were very, very good to watch. One is a podcast called Escaping NXIVM. It was by a guy that knew someone that got out of the cult. And the other one, there's one on HBO, there's one on Hulu, there's one on Prime. I'll find out what the other one is. The other one is told from actress Catherine Oxenberg's daughter's story. I believe that's the one on HBO. So I want to add on to what I was saying before, because I was listening to this wondering where would I fit in, and the more I listen to this, it's so fascinating, and I don't think there is an answer of this type of a person wouldn't be affected, and this one was. This was kind of just brilliant the way they set this up, but I'm going to put this right out there before I even get talking about it. They use the term brainwashed, but I will tell you there is a term that we're missing here with cults, and it really is hypnosis. And I really do think the more I listen to these people, you set up their trust, you set up your trust, you set up their trust. And then one of the ladies that was at the top, who was probably one of the most interesting in it, and they didn't cover a lot about her, she worked in some group before that was like all about, it had a negative connotation to hypnosis, and she was a part of that group. And I think that's the word we should use more than brainwashed, because all of these people also, when they got out or when they started to get out, you can hear them say it just like a snap. Like there it was. They saw it. Oh my God, this is it. There was no wavering. It was like in hypnosis when you're suddenly woken up. So I'm going to go with the word hypnosis, and I'm going to say, you know what, anybody could fall for a cult. In fact, one of the most interesting things that somebody in one of these shows said was the thing is, these are not, the reason these people get kind of sucked into this is because they're good people. And I found that to be very interesting, because good people are trusting or don't want to think the worst of someone, whereas a bad person would have been suspicious of this Keith Rainier right from the start. So it's like good people. The whole cult was set up as a multi-level marketing thing. So this is Jonestown meets Amway. And it was kind of crazy because I always think doTERRA is a multi-level marketing, but it's a good product. So I don't know if it's a cult, but this was set up. It's so perfect. And those of you in the spiritual community, listen, because some of it sounds like us. It was set up as you get in these classes, and they teach you to get over your hangups, get over what's in front of you, take responsibility for yourself. How good does that sound, right? So, and then you have all these people above you who are getting you in, who they have taken the next level of class, and you can't wait to get at that level. And here's the other thing. The failure is on you. If you ask questions, then it's your fault that you trust it. You have trust issues. You got to get over your trust issues before you're going to ask us that. That kind of thing. It was such a complete personality manipulation. And it even goes to the point where, we'll get to this later, where certain women were branded this guy's initials on them. That was one of the biggest things that made, they all got branded. They said they didn't tell them it was this guy's initials, but it was, which happened to be KR. And I'm just going to say, if you're from NXIVM and you're listening to this, tell yourself that's Karen Rontowski and that she thinks you're a hero for getting out, okay? Because that is different than a tattoo. That is, oh my God, that whole part of this is where it really, you go, oh, geez. And these women, they're sort of teamed up over. Well, she's doing it and she's doing it. And then you have the one above them telling them what, it just gets crazier and crazier. So I'm not even sure how much. I might do the bullet points on this one and then skip the next one because there's so much here that I almost don't know if I can get into it without like covering hours. And this is too much. I've already looked at this guy too long. This guy was supposed to be one of the most brilliant people in the world. His father said, Keith Raniere is his name. His father said when he was a kid and they found out he had a really high IQ, it immediately affected him. Like they told him he had a really high IQ and he suddenly had this God complex, like he was better than everyone else. And that it's really interesting at like, it was like 12 or 13. His mother caught him on the phone with several different women, like in a day, promising them that they were the one, like she was listening and she's like, this is a shyster right away, making them all feel special, making them feel like they're the only one. So this is starting as a kid. In fact, he still tells everyone, or it was in the Guinness World Book of Records, that he was one of the smartest men in the world. I think it is, they say he's the smartest man in the world. So one of the reporters from the Albany Times or the Albany newspaper found that there was one old Guinness World Book of Records that she had to buy on eBay from Australia. Like it was listed in one, not all of them. It sounds like a misprint and he's not in them at all anymore. I don't know if they removed him, but she was like, this is, there it is, but this is kind of hoaxy. Pardon me, my throat is a mess. So he meets up with this Nancy Salzman, who is not his wife or girlfriend. I think everybody else was but her. And they start, I don't know if he started or she started, they start these classes, and they're called ESP. And that stands for Executive Success Programs. And this is where it begins. If you're somebody that doesn't know what you want to do with your life, if you're having trouble getting started, if your career is stalled, this is just like a class. This is like a life coach. It's like anything. And then it just starts getting bigger and bigger. And there's more of these little groups. And by the time they sort of picked up what was going on with this, not that many people had contact with Keith, except for like the women he was sleeping with or whatever. And there was a girl named Allison Mack. I think that was what her name was. And she was in Smallville. She was an actress. And Allison Mack. She was so high up in this cult. She's actually in jail right now. But when you look at Nancy Salzman and you see Allison Mack and you see any kind of video of these two talking to Keith, they are so clearly in love with him. Or the way they look at him like he's Jesus, it's really creepy. And it's just like they're hypnotized by him all the time. And Allison Mack went to jail for bringing in women into a program they had called DOS, which I'm going to get to in a minute. But the whole thing about this cult is they had places all over the world. And here's my thing. If you have places in California, in Costa Rica, all over the place, and you can actually talk people into coming to Albany, New York, they are hypnotized because there were so many better places to go. And there were all these activities. They would have to call Keith Vanguard. This is a thing with cult leaders. They like to take on a nickname or another name that kind of separates them and sort of puts them above, so they don't use their real name. So they would have Vanguard Week. And that whole week was when you went through all these programs, and each of the groups from around the country, around the world, would come to pay homage to Keith. And this is where it gets even more bizarre. And so it's this week of, we're all up at this camp or wherever they were, and we're still skiing on the water. It's during the summer. There's cookouts. There's all this stuff. And part of what they do in this is they continually keep you tired. They keep you tired all the time. I guess this helps with the hypnosis or the brainwashing, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it hypnosis. Not to give hypnosis a bad name, but this is what it was. And also, at the end, they put on this show. Everybody does whatever, a dance number, a song. And it's actually one of those, I feel terrible saying this, but sometimes when non-trained folks or non-show business folks all decide to dance, it's just very funny. Some are very good, some are dancers, but it's kind of like you're watching this like, is this a high school play? Is it good? What is happening here? And he's just sitting there absorbing it all in with Nancy Salzman right next to him. And he also has this weird thing where he kisses everyone on the lips. If you talk to him, you have to kiss him on the lips. Thank God he wasn't there during COVID. Can you imagine? So, and I'm not doing this justice, but this is just classes upon classes upon classes. You're going to get to the next level. You're going to get the highest level. You're going to get the higher level. And if anything goes wrong, it's your fault. So this is where things really started to go wrong for him, or where this kind of came up. And I will say this, the thing about cults, even if they have female cult leaders, it's always based on sexism. They had these programs for women where they were taught to be submissive, or there could be punished. Your husband punishes you if you don't do A, B, or C, something like that. Very, very strange. And also, when you hear him talking to the men, he's literally just kind of giving them permission not to control themselves. And also he uses that phrase where they said there was a study done on men, and men just want to spread their seed everywhere. That's how they're biologically wired. That's why they can't be monogamous, which, if you know anything about that, that was a completely fabricated, I guess I'll put fact or factoid on it, that the person that announced that was doing the tests on fruit flies, so not actual men. And also, those of you men out there that are monogamous, I can't say the word, my throat is going through this, that's to not insult you. Also, there's a book everyone should read called True. The author's first name is Wednesday, and it's about how the affairs gap has closed, just as many women as men. So as there's this small programming about how women should act and about how men should act, if you go far enough, you're going to be far along in your classes. You're going to go up higher. You're going to do this. You got to get more people under you. Every time you move up a class, you have to recruit like 5 people under you, something like that. But this is everybody thinking in unison. And this does kind of scare me when I hear the community, our community, kind of, I'll say the spiritual community, talking about living in communes and stuff. And I'm like, I don't think that's going to work. I wish it would work. It sounds great. But this is exactly kind of what's going on here. So the place this starts to fall apart. My window is rattling. I don't know if you can hear that. It's so rainy and cold here. So in 2017, an exclusive, highly secret women's society within the organization was called DOS, Dominus Obsequious Sororium. Dominus Obsequious. Somebody's correcting me as you listen. I know I'm this sloppy. DOS is what it's called, which is a Latin phrase that roughly translates as lord over the obedient female companions. And this is where it starts with women over women. They use a slave master technique. And it starts with women, and one has to be the slave and the other one has to be the master. And many people not uncomfortable with this, but go along with it. Oh, it's not really what it means. It's all this other stuff. Whatever, blah, blah, blah. Not really what it means. So you're already getting these people programmed in that line of thinking of master slave. And they're doing it with women first. So it gets way easier with men. Now, this also runs a little bit like Scientology, in that Scientology, they have something, if you're blocked, they got to get these things off of you. I don't know, mind blocks. So he actually has the same thing, what is considered an EM. The most common way NXIVM members would therapize, I never heard that term, therapize their actions was through an EM, or an exploration of meaning, a term Rainier created. During an EM, a member and a highly ranking NXIVM teacher would sit in a chair facing each other while a group of others members watched. Now, when you are being put in DOS, so you have a problem, you can't go to DOS, what is this? They would specifically make sure people felt like they weren't advancing, so that when they pulled them aside to say, no, I'm going to help you out. Like I said, it's that other book, Cut Them Down so you can be the friend that builds them up. So before they can go to DOS, they are all asked to give collateral. The slave is to give collateral to the master. And that collateral could be anything from naked pictures, which I know right now that's not as big a deal, but this was a while ago. So I'll figure out what year this is. People writing horrible letters saying their parents did something their parents didn't do. But it is to show your trust by handing over collateral for the group, which obviously you can see this eventually turns into later what we're going to do if you try to get out. So when this DOS group, when women get in, they have a secret meeting, and that is where they're doing good with their slave master type thing. And then they go to the home of one of the women, and a doctor comes in with a pen and brands them. And as you can imagine, that is unbelievably painful. It is, they are told that they've all done it. This is fine. You got to do it. It's just the next level. If you can't do this, it's your fear and there's something wrong with you. And it sounds like a lot of them did that. But that was sort of, they talks about this girl, Sarah, that when her husband saw it, that's when they were like, we're out. And she was very, very high up. If you ever want to see anything interesting online, go to YouTube and watch Allison Mack, who is the actress, talking to Keith Rainier. She was at the top. She's in jail now for sex trafficking. So basically, when you're in DOS, you also have to be on high alert. So there is a thing where if you get a text message, you have to answer within a minute or you have to be punished. And this is where they are buzzing them all night long. Some of them can't sleep with their husbands because their phone is coming off. This is like where they're really breaking them down to put them as one of his sex slaves, which I believe there turned out to be like 100 at one point, or at the point that they arrested him. And also, it was very weird because he had a girlfriend who was like the girlfriend. Like she would... Okay, so I apologize. I need to find the name of... There was one woman that was supposedly his only girlfriend and his soulmate. And if he was having a bad day, they would run to her house and tell her it was her fault, that she was so connected to him that she had his emotions under control. It's very interesting. That one girlfriend had no idea that he had like 100 girlfriends. But that makes sense to me because if you're worried about one woman, you'd probably be more attentive. If you're looking at 100, you're probably thinking, this can't be, he can't be with 100 women. So anyways, I can't find where I wrote that name down. But now, so you're saying, how did all this get funded? Well, this guy was a major con artist. He even had the Dalai Lama write, I think, the foreword to one of his books or something like that. And I will tell you this. I know that what the Dalai Lama did with that kid is actually an Indian tradition, but I always found him a little creepy. And NXIVM paid him $1 million to be a friend of theirs. And he totally just went along with it. Totally just was a member of NXIVM, like sort of on the sideline. So I just think he's creepy, and I think we're all done with spiritual leaders like that anyways. Dalai Lama actually took some money from the CIA. He said if there's a female Dalai Lama, she better be good looking or nobody will listen to her. So he's a great guy. Now, there was so much money involved with NXIVM, and something like 65 million, something more like that, came from these two women that were part of the Seagram's, they were Seagram heirs, like Seagram 7 and alcohol. Their father started that. So this is Sarah and Claire Bronfman. And their father owns the Seagram. They just kept putting money into this. They were the ones that paid the Dalai Lama to come. They actually, at least one of them, I think it was Sarah, ended up in jail, or it was Claire. One of them ended up in jail. I don't see where the other one did, but they just kept funding everything Keith did. There was another lady that was in the higher ups, and this is where it gets so strange. She had been a person that worked in finance and had a lot of money, and then got into the cult. And he would come up to her and he'd say, I just got into the commodities market, and we need to get in. I had a download or an inspiration, so we need to put 50,000 in the commodities market. I'll do it. Do you want to kick in 25? And he talks her into it, and then when they get there or wherever they're going to buy this, he asks her if he can borrow his 25,000. So that's just, how do you do that? How do you do that? Let's do this for 50,000. By the way, can I borrow 50,000? Can I borrow 25? So about a week later, he comes back to her in tears because, of course, he's not only lost this money, he's about 600,000 in debt. I don't know how you do that. I don't know anything about commodities, but he needs that money now. So she eventually gives him that money, and it goes on, and she keeps telling him to stop, and he just finally wipes out her bank account. So that's the kind of thing, like that's someone that's hypnotized. So the DOS program, which I can't remember which documentary I was watching, but they had a chart of his sex slaves and how they were forced because of collateral. But I really would recommend that podcast. It's called Escaping NXIVM, because they do speak with this one woman, Sarah Edmondson, who was a Canadian actress, and I think she was the one that really started it on its way out. I think she was the first one in the New York Times, but there's others where Catherine Oxenberg started to go a little to these things, and her daughter really got caught up. Her daughter was 19, didn't know what she wanted to do with her life. I'm sure this guy looks amazing. Let me tell you something. As a comedian, when you start in comedy, you're trying to do stand-up is enough, but trying to book yourself and all that, it's really like most comedians are not built for business. And I know a lot of females, as did I, were just, oh my God, what if that man came by and he did the business for me and he was great? That was Joan Rivers' husband. He did the business and she got to be the nice person. And so you can see, as a young girl, just still thinking men have your answers or men are going to protect you, how easily you could just start falling into this. And then they keep you tired. And then you have a community. Now you have a whole community. These people are your friends. And these people really were friends. These are who your friends are. But I'm going to wrap this up just because I think my voice is going. And please, if you know anything about this cult and you have something interesting to add, please leave it in the comments. But one of the ladies was going over what the cult, how they do to get you in. First of all, they separate you from your family, or make sure they know, you know that they are your family. They have certain names or titles for superiors, making sure that names and titles are what you want to strive, or knowing that these people are separate from us. They desensitize people, so they will have no feelings and they can do horrifying things. That's where by the time you are so desensitized, you're so tired trying to answering those text messages, this and that, somebody goes to put a brand on you and everybody else is like, okay, all right. That's what happened. This also is sort of where there's some tapes of this guy talking about, the whole context is about how he can, it's literally him saying, I'll show you, I can talk to you and teach you about a child that deserved to be molested, or I can make it so you would rape a baby. Like, he's saying that. And then they have some footage of him, like, going into detail and how he's, and it's really, if you're in that cult or you think he's God, you have to watch it. Go watch that. So that's how you're getting talked into child molestation. And then it's day-to-day control, which again are the text messages, which is the team, which is, are you going to Vanguard Week? Are you going to this? Blah, blah, blah. But it really is interesting to me how sometimes we could really get caught up in it. I went to a yoga retreat once, and they did a lot of things like this. Or I remember the reason I almost couldn't go, this was way before retreats were in. I couldn't go because I got onto David Letterman, which some of you are probably way too young, but that was a huge deal. And they kept bumping me. I was supposed to be on this week, fly out there. They fly me back. I didn't get on. They keep bumping you because as a comedian, you're sort of last on the totem pole. So I said, well, I don't know if I can go to that because I'm supposed to be on Letterman. And the guy was like, no, this is going to change your life. Letterman isn't going to change your life. And little did he know, yeah, Letterman totally changed my life. But he was like, you need to call Letterman and tell them when you're going to be on. And I was like, this guy's got no fucking idea what he's talking about. So they sort of twist everything to get you there. And these two people that were running the yoga retreat, that's where I became vegan, which, okay, they did it, but they showed a movie called, it's not called Humans. I forget what it's called. But it's all the animal torture for everything, from meat to fur coats to shoes to leather, Earthlings, that's what it's called. And they made us all watch that. They broke us down. They overdid how much information. They yelled at us. And then they made us watch that. I don't know how many other people stayed vegan. I'm pretty much an animal crazy person. So for me, that really wasn't a stretch. It was more learning how to do it. So for me and for my body, that works out good. But you don't lock people in like that. It was very strange. So, but they were too unorganized to be a cult. And then there was the time, I'm going to save that story, about when I was initiated into a coven. So anyways, that is one of the things I think I have to have Monique on my, from inner standings, like inner understandings, my friend Monique. Monique, if you're still on the Patreon, put your link in the podcast. I just got one of her, fear of success, I think it was, hypnosis. I bought it off her website, and it's great, and it's exactly what is needed. But I'd love to have you on, Monique, and we'll talk about the dark side of hypnosis, because that is exactly what it is. And it's just, I don't know if it's so interesting, because I don't know if the next generation is going to fall for that, because they're so not sexist and they're so not putting up with it. Okay, in NLP hypnosis was the first thing that this Nancy Salzman was about, which I'd actually like to see a story on her. She looked pretty fascinating within this whole mess. But anyways, that was choppy. That's how I do it. That's a little about the NXIVM cult in upstate New York. And we have plenty. And then there's one, and I see children on the front, and I'm like, I don't know if we want to do that. But hope you all are not hypnotized right now and joining a cult, although the Paranormal Karen cult pretty good. So I feel really like, when I was listening as a comedian, you're always hearing jokes in your head, but none of them were ever pointed towards any of these people, even the women that were giving over the money. When you listen to hours and hours and hours of how this became their life, you can still say to yourself, well, I wouldn't do that. But you know what? It was everything. It was community. He told them he was going to save the world, or this is how we're going to do it, and we're going to be the upper echelon, or whatever. And you can just see how it happens. So that's it. everybody, happy May. What's going on in Utica? Have a great day.